You're my mother, Damon hissed, shaking the court order. Elaine met his eyes. Not anymore. Not where it counts. He laughed, brittle and desperate. You think this piece of paper undoes blood? She handed him the second envelope. It undoes silence. Across the yard, Margaret watched, stone still, like she'd seen this ruin coming, and for the first time Damon realized he hadn't just lost the money, he'd lost the woman who once loved him most. The envelope was cream-colored, creased at the corners, and sat beneath a stack of junk mail on the hallway table, unforwarded, unopened, and entirely forgotten until Elaine saw his name, Damon C. Wells. She gasped softly, a week too late. The sunlight slanted through the narrow window above the front door, catching the gold in the embossed return address, Wexley and Hartman Financial. Elaine picked it up with a tremble in her hand like it might burn her fingers. It hadn't even crossed her mind, not with the pharmacy mix-up, the flat tire, and her aching hip. But excuses wouldn't matter, not to Damon. She moved slowly to the kitchen, sat at the table, and reached for her phone. His number was still pinned at the top of her favorites. The call rang once, then twice. He picked up with a clipped breath. Why now? There was some mail, she began gently. It looks like it's from that firm you... It was time-sensitive, Mom. Jesus! His voice sharpened like a blade. Do you even know how long I've waited for this? Elaine swallowed. I gave you one job. One. Forward my mail, that's it. I'm running a business, not babysitting someone who can't remember the damn mailbox. She bit down on the inside of her cheek, kept her tone level. It was underneath, you know what? Forget it. He exhaled bitterly. Why are you even still alive if you can't do something this simple? Silence. He hung up. The air around her didn't move. The refrigerator hummed. A single leaf scraped the kitchen window outside, as if nature itself was too stunned to intervene. Elaine sat, phone limp in her palm, eyes unfocused. She didn't cry, not then. Instead, she pushed herself slowly to her feet and walked to the drawer near the fridge, the one labeled Wills and Receipts in her late husband's shaky script, and placed the envelope carefully inside. She closed the drawer, turned the lock, and slipped the key into her apron pocket like a secret. But still the words hung in the air like smoke. Why are you even still alive? The sound of wind chimes brought the memory. It had been 37 years since Charles died. Elaine had buried him under an overcast February sky while holding Damon's 6-year-old hand so tightly his fingers turned pale. The cemetery grass had bled through their shoes. She didn't cry then either, not in front of her son. She remembered forcing her smile through the graveside eulogy, even though she couldn't feel her knees beneath her. I'll raise him for both of us, she whispered to Charles's grave, voice raw with grief and fear. She worked 2 jobs, skipped meals so he could have seconds, missed doctor's appointments for his soccer games, never remarried, never complained. Now at 73, that little boy had become the man who asked her why she hadn't already left this world. Elaine opened a box from the hall closet labeled Damon Keep. Inside, a finger-painted birthday card from 2nd grade, a note, Mommy, you are the best. Circle yes or yes. A worn photo of him in a science fair ribbon, grinning gap-toothed. She sat on the carpet, pulled a pen from her sweater sleeve, and flipped the back of the photo. Then wrote, You were the reason I survived. Why am I still alive? Because I thought you still needed me. She stared at the envelope one last time, still tucked inside the drawer. And for the first time, she realized it wasn't just a mistake, it was a test, and she'd failed. She stood, took a breath that rattled through her ribs, and whispered to the empty kitchen, I won't forget anything else. Then walked upstairs and turned on the shredder. Not for the envelope. For the Mother's Day card he'd mailed last year with a printed message and no signature. Elaine hadn't left the house since the call. She moved through her days with the quiet detachment of someone who'd been mugged emotionally, still checking for bruises she couldn't see. The refrigerator still hummed. The air still smelled faintly of lavender and pine saw, but everything else had rearranged itself under a single sentence. Why are you even still alive? At 10:12 a.m., she brewed tea she wouldn't drink and sat at the kitchen table, staring across the room like someone waiting for a fire to restart from smoke alone. Her eyes drifted to the cordless phone on the wall. She pressed redial. It rang once, twice, voicemail. She hung up, no message. Outside, her neighbor Margaret was watering her azaleas, pretending not to glance toward the house. Elaine didn't wave. She couldn't remember the exact moment Damon began to shift, but she could trace the slope. It was somewhere after the wedding. The bride, Samantha, had money, but more than that, she had an air of disinterest that wrapped itself around Damon like a velvet leash. Elaine remembered offering to help with the rehearsal dinner. Samantha had smiled like it was adorable that she thought she was needed. After that, things changed. Birthdays became forgotten voicemails. Christmas came with dry thank you cards, no calls. And Damon, he became someone else. Someone polished, impatient, always reaching for a phone that rang more than he ever did. Elaine sighed and opened the cedar chest at the foot of her bed. Inside, she kept a lifetime curated in scent and softness, pressed letters, a lock of hair from Damon's first haircut, the ribbon from the hospital wristband that once circled his tiny arm. She pulled out a stack of old drawings, stick figures with huge heads and crooked smiles. One had the words "Me plus Mom equals team" in blocky, determined letters. She held the paper to her chest and exhaled hard. That little boy was gone, but he had been real. That mattered. The betrayal hurt more because of that sweetness. It wasn't just loss, it was theft, and now there were debts. She walked back to the kitchen, sat down, and pulled a legal pad from the drawer, drew a line down the center with slow, surgical precision. At the top, she wrote, "What I owe him, what he owes me." On the left, she listed, "Life, meals, rent-free, college, summers, love unreturned." On the right, respect, one honest thank you, a call on my birthday not wishing me dead. She stared at the list for a long time, then added under the second column, "Everything." She tore off the page and folded it into thirds, tucked it inside her address book under W for Will. It wasn't legal, not yet, but it was an outline, a mood, a beginning. Her phone vibrated with a notification, some promotion from a drugstore chain. She deleted it, then hovered over Damon's contact. A smiling headshot from 4 years ago still flashed beside his name, back when he still called her Ma. She tapped edit, deleted the photo, replaced the name with "Do not call until he's human," saved. As the sun sank low, Elaine returned to the cedar chest for one last item, a newspaper clipping from 1991 when Damon won a citywide math contest. The photo showed him holding a cheap trophy, Elaine beaming beside him. He had written on the back, "For Mom who makes me smarter than the other kids." She flipped it over again. Under the fading ink, she added in her own hand, "But not kind enough to remember where he came from." Her pen hovered. Then, with steady pressure, she crossed it out, because kindness, unlike trust, couldn't be demanded. It had to be remembered. Just as she stood to return the clipping, the doorbell rang. A courier envelope on the doorstep, no return address. Her name in tight, masculine letters. Inside, a notice of a property evaluation, Damon's business logo stamped at the top. He was having her home appraised without asking. Elaine didn't flinch. She walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out the same pen, and wrote a new list. At the top, in sharper handwriting, "How I'll end this nicely." The lemon cake sat untouched on the counter. Elaine had cut a single slice at noon, placed it carefully on her best china, and waited, watching the clock hands do their laps like tired swimmers. By 2:15 p.m., she knew Damon wouldn't show, not even a text. 74 years on Earth, and the day passed without a call from her only child. She wrapped the cake in foil, slid it into the fridge, and poured herself a glass of tap water. Not wine, not today. The glass sweat in her hand while she stared at the small stack of gift bags she'd arranged by the door. 2 for neighbors, 1 for the mailman, and 1 for Damon. A modest blue bag with navy tissue and a note that read, "You still matter to me." She slipped it into the pantry and closed the door. At dusk, Margaret appeared on the porch, a small Tupperware in hand and something like defiance in her walk. "You didn't think I'd let you eat alone, did you?" Elaine blinked. "I didn't—" "Hush," Margaret said, letting herself in. "I brought beef stew and gossip." They sat at the table beneath the soft glow of the overhead bulb. The silence between spoons was comfortable, not hollow. Elaine looked older in the light, tired, yes, but tighter around the eyes, like a wound stitching itself closed. Margaret finally leaned back. "He didn't come, huh?" Elaine shook her head. "I stopped counting missed birthdays when my oldest moved to Arizona," Margaret said gently. "But I'll tell you something. They don't get to erase us. They don't get to act like we were a bad dream just because we're not profitable anymore." Elaine didn't reply. She didn't need to. After Margaret left, Elaine walked upstairs to her bedroom, lit only by the amber lamp on her nightstand. She sat down at the small desk tucked into the corner and opened the drawer with her will. Red pen this time, not black. She didn't hesitate. a thick line through Damon Charles Wells as primary heir. Then she scribbled out the alternate beneficiary, one of his shell companies she now recognized from the appraisal document. In the margins, she wrote, "To be amended with alternate nonprofit. No family listed unless otherwise stated," then underlined it twice. Her hand didn't shake. Next, she picked up the phone and dialed her lawyer. "Elaine," came the warm voice on the other end. "Happy birthday, dear. I need to come in Monday morning. There's paperwork I'd like to make legally unforgivable." A pause. "I'll have fresh ink ready." After hanging up, Elaine moved to the small shelf in the hallway where her birthday cards had collected over the years. She opened Damon's from last year, a generic design with pre-printed gold lettering. No note, not even "Love, Damon." She held it over the shredder and paused just long enough to say, "Never again." The motor hummed like a final judgment. She turned back to the kitchen where the answering machine's light blinked red. One message. She pressed play. Damon's voice, slick, rehearsed. "Sorry I couldn't swing by. Sam booked us a last-minute dinner in the city. Hope you enjoyed your day. You still have that landline, huh?" Click. Elaine stood silently in the blue-gray kitchen light, staring at the counter where the slice of lemon cake had left a faint circle on the plate. She reached into the junk drawer and pulled out the envelope again, the original one, still unopened. She didn't open it now either. Instead, she walked to the fireplace, set it inside, and struck a match. As the paper curled into blackness, she whispered aloud, "You forgot more than a birthday, Damon. You forgot who raised you." Then, without turning back, she walked into the next room where the folder for beneficiary options sat waiting. Elaine wore her Sunday coat not because it was cold, but because it made her feel immovable, sturdy. The same charcoal gray wool she'd worn at Charles's memorial, at Damon's high school graduation, at the bank when she'd co-signed the first loan that launched her son's independent success. Now it would mark something else entirely. Her lawyer's office smelled faintly of legal pads and burnt coffee filters. Framed diplomas lined the walls like silent witnesses. Barry, a kind-eyed man with salt and pepper sideburns and a tie that didn't quite match, closed the folder in front of him with gentle finality. "You're sure about this?" Elaine didn't blink. "Absolutely." He slid the documents across the table, thick pages, heavy with consequence. "Removing a primary heir isn't just emotional, it's legal shrapnel." "Then let's not leave any fragments." She signed in 4 places, initialed twice. With each stroke of the pen, it felt less like betrayal and more like amputation, long overdue. She didn't hesitate, not once. The ink barely had time to dry before she tapped the final page and asked, "How soon can it be sent?" Barry tilted his head. "Most clients prefer quiet transitions. I can have it electronically stored, password protected." "I want it mailed." He raised a brow. "Certified return receipt, and I want it delivered to his office, not his home. He should feel it where it hurts." In front of his staff, the people who think he built himself. Barry smiled despite himself. "All right then, we'll get it notarized and out by tomorrow." Elaine stood. "Make sure it's signed in blue ink. I want him to know it was real." Outside, she stepped into the wind and exhaled so slowly it felt like smoke might leave her lungs. She walked 2 blocks to the small post office by the diner and bought a single stamp for something else. The certified documents would go by courier, but this was personal. Back home, Elaine stood at the kitchen table, hands pressed flat against a sheet of letterhead. She scrolled a cover note in deliberate penmanship. "To Mr. Damon Wells, please consider this your official termination notice as both heir and son. Inheritance withdrawn, respect dissolved. EMW." She folded the letter, slipped it into a pale envelope with the certified packet, and sealed it with a damp thumb. Before leaving for the drop-off, Elaine opened the closet and pulled down a shoebox labeled Business Damon. She hadn't touched it in years. Inside were old tax forms, bank documents, and a copy of the first loan Damon ever secured. The co-signer line stared up at her, her name neatly printed. He was 24, barely out of undergrad, and already talking about equity, profit margins, and quarterly burn rates. But it had been Elaine's credit that gave him his start, her savings that filled the gaps, her silence that let him take all the credit. She remembered the photo from that day, Damon beaming, holding the check like he'd won the lottery. He didn't mention her in the caption he later posted, just the phrase, "Hard work pays off." Elaine ran her fingers over the signature. Back then it had felt like love. Now it looked like leverage. She tucked the document back into the box, sealed it with fresh tape, and wrote in thick marker across the lid, "Not mine anymore." At the post office, she handed over the certified envelope with calm hands. "Do you want tracking updates?" the clerk asked. "No," Elaine said. "Just confirmation that it landed." That evening, as the sun cast long shadows across her porch, Elaine sat beside Margaret and sipped tea without sugar. "Did you do it?" Margaret asked softly. Elaine nodded once. "He'll get it tomorrow, around 10 a.m., probably between meetings." "Think he'll call?" "I hope not," she said, "because I might answer." They both laughed, short, sharp, satisfied. But later that night, Elaine stood alone in the hallway, staring at the shredder. In her hand was Damon's business card, the last one she had. She didn't shred it. She slid it into a fresh folder labeled Receipts and whispered aloud, "Time to collect." Elaine clicked print and watched the screenshots glide out one by one, like receipts from a very old, very personal transaction. There he was, Damon, on a glossy white panel at some boutique investor conference last month, sitting beside tech bros in tight blazers, laughing too hard at his own joke. The caption on the event's livestream replay read, "What I've learned about scaling quickly and what I learned from my parents' mistakes." Elaine didn't need sound to hear the tone. His smirk said enough. Another post, a clipped quote pulled from his bio interview, "You can't let guilt control your decisions. Sometimes family just means history, not destiny." And a tweet from his verified account, "Reminder, being born to someone doesn't mean you owe them anything. Get over it." Elaine fed the pages into a manila envelope with steady hands. At the top, she added a handwritten note in perfect cursive. "To the board of the Hartley Integrity Foundation, this is who you almost gave your legacy to. Thank you for letting me correct the record. Sincerely, Elaine M. Wells." She addressed it to the trustee's office and walked it to the mailbox herself. By noon the next day, her phone dinged. An email from the foundation director. Subject, "Your story matters." Elaine opened it slowly, then sat down. They had read everything, every word. They called her actions quiet courage in loud times, and they wanted her to speak at the fall gala, not just as a donor, but as the night's opening speaker. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from a sense of something rebalancing. Across town, Damon's assistant opened the certified envelope at 10:07 a.m. Elaine pictured the moment clearly. The crisp paper, the legal header, the phrasing impossible to misinterpret, termination of beneficiary rights effective immediately. Witnessed and notarized. Elaine was in her garden when the call came. She saw the name flash across the screen, Damon Mobile, and stood still. The peony didn't care. The breeze moved on. She watched it ring 4 times, 5, voicemail. He didn't leave one. She walked inside, rinsed her hands in cold water, and returned to the kitchen counter. The phone buzzed again, another call from him. No voicemail. This time she pressed the red button, decline. She opened her contacts list, scrolled, tapped his name, then hit delete contact. A small digital confirmation blinked on the screen. "Are you sure?" Elaine didn't hesitate. "Yes." Outside, the wind changed direction, and with it, something inside her finally stopped circling. She pulled open the drawer labeled Receipts and tucked away the phone bill with the deleted log beside Damon's old business card. She didn't need to keep it for court. She just needed the memory of the moment she didn't answer. Later that evening, a new email arrived from the foundation. Attached, a draft of the gala program. Speaker 1, Elaine Wells. "Truth is also an inheritance." Beneath it, a personal note from the trustee. "Your courage spoke volumes before you ever stepped on stage. Let's make sure others hear it." Elaine smiled softly, then turned off her lamp. But she didn't sleep. Not out of worry, out of clarity. At 2:12 a.m., another call buzzed her phone. Blocked number. She didn't pick up, but this time she saved the call log and whispered to the dark, "Try me again, Damon. The world's listening now." The knock didn't come like a question. It landed like a verdict. Elaine had just set the kettle on when the front door rattled from the second slam. She moved slowly, carefully, the bones in her knees cracking like old floorboards beneath her. Through the peephole, Damon, jaw tight, eyes wired, suit too crisp for a man showing up uninvited. She opened the door just wide enough to block his entry. "You can't be serious," he snapped, holding up the torn open certified envelope. This little stunt?" Elaine kept her face level. "It's not a stunt. It's notarized. You think this holds up? I will contest it. There's precedent. Emotional duress, cognitive decline, elder manipulation. Pick your poison. That foundation conned you. Her grip tightened on the doorknob. You're on my porch, Damon, she said coolly. And I didn't invite you. Damon scoffed. Unbelievable. You think you're some symbol now? People saw the gala post. You think a little speech makes you bulletproof? She stepped out, closed the screen door behind her, and let her eyes settle on him with the same stillness she used to summon during his tantrums as a boy. You always thought being louder meant being right, she said. But I taught you better, he rolled his eyes. Here we go. No, she said sharply. Here I go. She walked back inside, retrieved a second envelope from the kitchen drawer, the duplicate Barry had prepared, and returned to the threshold. She extended it without ceremony. This one's for your records, she said. In case your lawyer wants a fresh paper trail. Damon didn't take it at first, just stared at it like it might detonate. She waited. Finally, with a slow, mocking chuckle, he snatched the envelope. You're bluffing, he muttered. You always threaten, but you never follow through. Elaine's face didn't move. I used to hope you'd turn back into someone worth saving. That's over. Across the lawn, Margaret stood by her hydrangeas, watching quietly. She didn't wave. She didn't interfere, but she did give a slow, subtle nod like a silent amen at the end of a sermon. Damon noticed. Oh, good, he said loudly, eyes flicking to Margaret. We've got an audience. Elaine held his gaze. Don't worry, you've always played best to a crowd. He stepped back, still laughing, like this was theater and he the misunderstood lead. I'll give it a week, he said. You'll change your mind. Elaine folded her arms. I don't do that anymore. He turned, walked down the steps, and slammed the gate behind him with enough force to jar the wind chimes into panicked song. Elaine stood motionless until the sound faded. Then she stepped back inside and locked the door. Deadbolt, chain, habit. At the table, the kettle whistled. She poured the water slowly over her teabag and let it steep, watching the brown swirl spread like ink in water. No tremor in her hand, no guilt in her chest, just clarity. But something hitched at the back of her mind. An old memory. Damon, age 12, sitting at the dinner table, bragging that he'd convinced a teacher to raise his grade by talking smart and smiling hard. He'd been so proud. She'd corrected him then. There's a difference, she'd said, between confidence and cruelty. She took her tea to the living room and added that memory to the list in her head, not as nostalgia, but as evidence. When she opened her notebook marked Estate Revision Notes, she underlined a phrase she'd added earlier that week. No appeals, no backdoors, no names reinstated. Then wrote one more line beneath it. Even if he cries. The doorbell rang again. She didn't move, just sat, sipped, and listened as the second knock faded into the past. Elaine found the envelope on Tuesday morning. It wasn't from Damon. It was from a credit union she'd never heard of, Delbrook Lending, and it didn't look like junk mail. Pale gray with a watermark seal, her name printed neatly in block font across the front. Inside, a loan statement, large balance, secured against anticipated estate disbursement. She sat down slowly. Her name was on the paperwork. Not as borrower, as collateral. It took 2 readings before the tremble began, not in her hands but her core. A slow, molten throb that started behind her ribs and moved outward like static beneath skin. She hadn't signed anything in years. She would have remembered. But Damon hadn't needed her to sign this time. He'd used her status, her assumed death, her legacy. A speculative inheritance forecast clearly sold to private investors or boutique lenders. And the worst part? It had worked. Elaine stood, walked to the fireplace, and pulled the shoebox labeled Business Damon from the cabinet. She opened it again, this time with urgency, and sifted through every line item, every co-signature from the last 20 years. Something didn't add up. She needed help. 2 days later, Barry connected her with a forensic accountant named Lena Chang, sharp-eyed, soft-voiced, and 3 steps ahead of every red flag. They met in a conference room that smelled faintly of toner and coffee filters. Lena laid out her findings like a quiet storm. You were used as silent collateral for at least 2 bridge loans, Lena said, tapping a red circle on the statement. This one references your projected life insurance payout, which, by the way, he cannot legally claim. Elaine's throat felt tight. And the other, an asset-backed line of credit. He listed you as benefactor in full standing. These documents are clever, not forged exactly, but deliberately vague. Elaine blinked once. So he's betting on me dying. Lena didn't respond, just pushed over a legal pad. We'll start untangling it. It'll take a few filings and a war chest of patience. Elaine picked up the pen. No more patience, she said. She signed the authorization to begin. Back at home, she sat at her desk in the fading afternoon light and pulled out her estate revision notes. She added a new tab. Debt protections. Underneath, remove any implied guarantees, revoke all dormant cosigns. Block name from third-party disclosures, audit all estate-forwarded projections. Then she wrote one more line, underlined twice. Make it legally exhausting to exploit me. Barry filed the motions that same week. A court petition to void Elaine's historic co-signatures and sever her legal identity from Damon's corporate documentation. The filing was technical, clean, and sharp enough to bleed without leaving fingerprints. It would take weeks, but the wheels had turned. That night, Margaret found her on the porch with a single candle lit and the day's mail in her lap. He's leveraged everything, Elaine said quietly. Even my obituary. Margaret sat beside her. Then make sure you live long enough to outlast the paperwork. Elaine smiled thinly. I'm just getting started. A car rolled by slowly, black sedan, tinted windows. Elaine watched it pause at the end of the street, then continue without stopping. She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her folder and added one last note scribbled in neat block letters. If you want war, Damon, bring receipts. Then she clipped the folder shut and locked it. Elaine stepped onto the stage with quiet steadiness. Her heels echoed faintly against the polished floor of the ballroom, the microphone standing like a litmus test at center stage. Soft candlelight flickered against champagne flutes. Velvet drapes framed the event like a stage play. But this wasn't theater, it was testimony. Dozens of tables, hundreds of eyes, and behind her, projected in delicate serif font, the screen read, Elaine Wells. Truth is also an inheritance. She took a breath, not to calm herself, but to take up space. My name, she began, voice smooth but flinted, is Elaine. I'm 74 years old, and until recently, I believed I would die quietly. Like a lot of people my age, I was taught not to raise my voice, not to make things uncomfortable, especially for family. She paused. Then one day my son asked me why I was still alive, because I had forgotten to forward his mail. The crowd stilled, some gasped, others held their breath, afraid to make noise over hers. I raised him by myself, I co-signed his first loan. I packed lunches and typed resumes and held back tears at every school drop-off. But none of that matters in a world where profit trumps presence and silence is mistaken for consent. A small round of applause began, building until it rippled across the room. Elaine didn't smile, not yet. I realized, she continued, that legacy isn't just what we leave behind. It's what we refuse to allow others to take while we're still standing. This time, when the applause swelled, she led it. Afterward, they didn't just thank her, they moved. By the end of the night, the Hartley Integrity Foundation had raised over $280,000, more than triple their goal. Strangers approached Elaine like old friends. One woman wept openly, another asked to record a podcast with her. And in the quiet back corner of the venue, the trustee leaned in and said, We'd like to name our new library wing in your honor, the Elaine Wells Center for Advocacy and Preservation. Elaine simply said, only if the books outlive the applause. Back at home, 2 days later, a cream envelope arrived, no return address. Inside, a dinner invitation. Damon's handwriting, careful but clipped. Let's start fresh, just the two of us. No lawyers, no history. It arrived the same day a reporter from the Journal-Sentinel called to request an interview for their Elder Courage series. Elaine made her choice quickly. She placed the invitation inside the old shoebox with his loan documents, sealed it shut again, and wrote across the lid. Wishful thinking. Do not open. Then, without hesitation, she retrieved the small velvet box from her jewelry drawer, the one that held her wedding ring. It was simple gold, faintly worn at the edges. Charles had bought it on layaway during his 3rd month as a steelworker. Elaine held it to her chest, then walked into the hallway, opened her desk drawer, and filled out the nonprofit's auction donation form. Item: 14-karat gold wedding ring. Note, for someone who still keeps their promises. She placed the ring inside a padded envelope, addressed it, and paused only once, long enough to whisper, Let this be the last thing you use to build something. That evening, Margaret joined her on the porch again. You look like you'd swallowed a spotlight up there, Margaret said, grinning. I wasn't nervous, Elaine replied, sipping her tea. I was angry. I just hid it under good posture. They both laughed, then fell into a warm hush. At midnight, her phone buzzed. Blocked number. She didn't answer. She opened her contacts again, typed a new entry, and left the name field blank, just a number. Then wrote in the notes section, "If he tries to cry, record everything," and hit save. The ad ran in the Sunday Ledger, page 14, just above the classifieds. A full legal notice printed in fine serif, bordered in black. Public declaration of revised estate, Elaine M. Wells. Legal notice of will and beneficiary amendment. No heirs listed, no family named, just a clear statement of Elaine's wishes, witnessed and filed. It felt strange seeing it in print. Something once whispered behind closed doors, now stapled to the town's breakfast table. But it felt right. By Tuesday, the story had spread. The Journal-Sentinel ran a feature titled, "The Woman Who Took Her Name Back." The sidebar showed Elaine's photo from the gala, shoulders back, chin slightly up, fire in her eyes. Below it, quotes from her speech circled in bold print. Readers flooded the comments with support. That same week, a manila envelope arrived at her door, no return address, but a floral stamp and shaky handwriting. Inside, 6 handwritten pages. The first line read, "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 3 years, but you made me feel like I'm still someone." Elaine read it twice, then carefully tucked the letter into a new folder. She labeled it "Responses Worth Keeping." They kept coming, cards, notes, an origami dove from a boy who'd seen her clip on TikTok. One card was from a woman in Idaho who wrote, "You reminded me I have a right to be disappointed, and to do something about it." Elaine didn't cry, not even when a bouquet of yellow mums arrived with a card that said, "For the mother I wish I had." Instead, she went to her desk and made one final adjustment to the will. At the bottom of the final page, just below the Hartley Foundation clause and Lily's pending trust fund, she added in crisp blue ink, "Any and all legal claims by Damon Charles Wells or affiliates are to be preemptively declined, nullified, and unchallenged. Permanent status irrevocable." She signed it, then drew a single line beneath her signature. Not a flourish, a boundary. That morning the air smelled like mint and soil. Margaret's azaleas had finally bloomed. The two women walked the edge of Elaine's garden in soft silence, gloved hands brushing weeds and gently separating stubborn roots from new sprouts. "Papers got you in again," Margaret said, thumbing a folded copy from her coat pocket. "You and some state senator, but I only recognized one woman worth reading." Elaine chuckled softly. "You're just glad the library wing has a better name than the mayor's dog park." Margaret knelt near the rose bush, careful not to crush the mint. "I meant it when I said they don't get to erase us." Elaine nodded. "You've always said it like you knew." Margaret stood and wiped her hands on her jeans. "That's because my son did it too. He called it cutting emotional liabilities, said I was too much history, not enough future." Elaine paused, trowel in hand. "I didn't know." "Not many do. That's why I wanted you to be louder than I could be." Margaret looked at her. "And you were—" They finished the garden in comfortable quiet. Lavender, basil, and thick stems of tomato plants brushed their shins. As Elaine packed up her tools, she glanced across the lawn to where the mailbox sat, still sturdy, still hers. Inside, a new letter waited. This one bore a government seal. Elaine opened it right there on the grass, a court date filed by Damon. She stared at the summons for a long time, then folded it in half and slid it into her receipts folder without a word. She didn't flinch, but she did whisper, "Let's see if he brings a lawyer or a mirror." Elaine wore navy, no pearls, no makeup, just clean lines and quiet spine. The courthouse was cold, echoing with heel clicks and bailiff murmurs, but the moment she entered, it stilled, not dramatically, just enough to shift weight in the room. Barry walked beside her, leather folio in hand, nodding toward the bench like a pilot before takeoff. Damon sat across the aisle in a tailored suit that fit too tightly at the neck. His jaw flexed when Elaine entered. She didn't look away. The judge called the case. The state seal behind her looked polished, freshly dusted, like dignity could be bought by presentation. Elaine's name echoed into the docket mic, and then the pages turned. Barry stood and spoke with composure, sharp as glass. "Your Honor, we present Exhibit Set A, communication records and estate filings documenting Miss Wells's express and repeated intent to revoke beneficiary rights from the plaintiff." He moved efficiently, no theatrics, just precision. Exhibit B, loan documentation submitted by the plaintiff listing speculative inheritance as asset collateral, and C, D, and E, affidavit from notaries, trustees, and the nonprofit confirming Miss Wells's direct authorization of all revisions. Then the anchor dropped. Exhibit F, a timeline of forged drafts sent by the plaintiff to third-party investors, documents misrepresenting Missy Wells's financial alignment as ongoing and unconditional. The room tightened. Damon shifted in his chair. His attorney whispered, "Too late." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Wells, did you submit any financial claims regarding this inheritance while knowingly removed as beneficiary?" I didn't know she'd made it official," Damon said, voice cracking like dry wood. "We were still talking. There was ambiguity." Barry interjected. "No ambiguity exists in legal removal. Notarized and mailed certified, signed and dated prior to the contested documents." The judge leaned forward. "So your defense is ignorance?" Damon looked down. "I was under pressure. Investors—" She cut him off. "Pressure doesn't equal permission." A silence descended, deeper than stillness, a kind of reckoning. From the gallery, a man in a dark gray suit, one of Damon's partners Elaine recognized, stood abruptly and left without a word. Another followed. No drama, just abandonment. The air smelled like scorched paper. Elaine sat still, hands folded in her lap. Not smug, just steady. The court adjourned with clear orders. All forged documents to be reviewed by financial fraud investigators, Elaine's will upheld as final, and damages potentially pending. The gavel fell like punctuation. Outside in the corridor, she walked slowly, not because she was tired, but because she had nowhere to rush. Damon caught up to her near the elevators, breathless. "Mom, wait!" She turned just enough. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck, the way he used to as a child when caught lying. "I didn't think you'd take it this far," he said. Elaine held his gaze. "I didn't think you'd make me." His face flickered, regret trying to mimic apology. "I'm sorry," he said flatly, "for whatever it's worth." She nodded once, not kindly, not cruelly. "You'll learn from loss," she said, "like I did." Then the elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. As they closed, she looked at him one final time, not with hatred, just history. Back at home, she took off her coat, unpinned her hair, and walked to the drawer marked Receipts. She added the court order. Next to it, she slipped in Damon's apology, scribbled hastily on the back of his business card, and slid into her hand before she left the courthouse. She didn't read it again. She just whispered to the drawer, "Let the next thing you try come with consequences." The porch light flicked on automatically as dusk crept in, and from her kitchen window, Elaine noticed a shadow move near the side gate. Not Damon. Someone smaller, holding a backpack. The text came at 2:07 a.m., not from a number she recognized, but the message was unmistakably Damon's. "Can we just talk one more time? Not about money. About us." Elaine read it in bed beneath the soft pulse of her bedside lamp. She didn't reply, just set the phone down on the quilt and stared at the ceiling fan, slowly spinning shadows across the walls. The manipulation had shifted. It wasn't threats now, it was appeals, sentimental rewrites, selective memory dressed up as remorse. 3 days later came a voicemail. "I miss when you used to send me your old soup recipes. Remember those winters when you'd sneak extra bread into my coat pocket? You always knew what I needed before I did." He paused before adding, "I'm sorry you had to go through court. That wasn't me. I wasn't myself." Elaine let the message expire untouched. She didn't delete it. She archived it, because she needed to remember Damon only reached for warmth after he burned something down. The following morning, she stood in the garage beside Margaret, both women in old sweatshirts, surrounded by cardboard and the dust of decades. Elaine lifted an old shoebox labeled Vacations and handed it to her. "Keep or toss?" Margaret asked. Elaine peeled off the lid. Inside, a stack of faded photos from Myrtle Beach, one with Charles holding Damon on his shoulders, both laughing. The corner of the photo was curled as if time had tugged it inward. "Toss," Elaine said after a pause. "I remember enough." They boxed up more memories. Some she donated to the community center, some she shredded, some just disappeared without announcement, buried in a burn pile with broken batteries and old tax returns. Later that night, Elaine sat at her desk and pulled out a crisp sheet of cream stationery. She began to write. "Dear Damon, I don't know what kind of apology you think I need. I don't know if you're even sorry or if you just miss control. But I do know this. Your absence taught me to listen to myself louder than I listened to you. And I'm listening now. To the silence, to the garden, to the pages of the book I'm writing without you in it. Goodbye does not always come with a slammed door. Sometimes it comes in lowercase with steady hands. She folded the letter slowly and placed it in an envelope, then wrote on the front, "Unsent," and filed it under a new drawer. Lessons. The next morning was overcast and mild, the kind of day Elaine always saved for visiting Charles. She walked the winding cemetery path with a scarf tied around her neck, carrying a single daffodil from the garden. His headstone was simple, weather-worn, solid. She sat on the bench beside it and said softly, "Did we raise him wrong, or did the world finish what we tried to soften?" No reply came, but the wind picked up, gentle but firm, tugging at her coat sleeve like a nudge. She laid the daffodil at the base of the stone and stood. When she returned home, a brochure waited in the mailbox. Wisconsin Elder Leadership Collaborative accepting nominations for Peer Advisory Council. Inside was a handwritten note from the foundation trustee. "You already lead by example. Now let others learn from it." Elaine didn't hesitate. She filled out the nomination card and sealed the envelope. That evening, a young reporter from the Journal-Sentinel emailed to ask for a follow-up. "You've become something of a symbol, miss. Wells, any advice for others going through something similar?" She typed back, "Don't wait for someone to give you your voice back. Take it." As she hit send, a knock came at the back door, not the front, not formal, soft, careful. Elaine stood, heart steady, and opened it. A teenage girl stood there, hair windblown, eyes wide with hesitation. I'm Lily," she said. "My mom said you might let me stay." Elaine didn't answer right away. She just stepped aside and said, "Only if you hang your coat and earn your room." Lily didn't have much, just a duffel bag, a chipped phone, and a folded note from her mother that smelled faintly of smoke and peppermint gum. Elaine read it in the porch light, nodding once when she finished. No explanations, just a line scribbled near the bottom. "She listens better than she lets on. Please try." Elaine opened the door wide enough for Lily to step through. "Shoes stay by the mat," she said, "and I don't chase after anyone. If you stay, you stay." Lily nodded, eyes flicking to the corner of the room like she was still preparing for a fight. They didn't talk much that first night. Elaine set a fresh towel on the guest bed, placed an old quilt over the sheets, and left a ceramic lamp on dim. She didn't ask what Lily had run from. The girl didn't volunteer. But by morning the girl's shoes were still by the mat and her duffel was unzipped. At breakfast, Elaine laid out toast, boiled eggs, and black coffee. Lily took one piece of toast and buttered it with the caution of someone unsure whether food came with strings. After a few minutes, Elaine spoke. "One rule," Lily looked up. "Respect the space," Elaine said. "That includes yourself." The girl nodded slowly. From then on, things happened gradually, not like a movie montage, more like compost turning to soil. Elaine taught Lily how to garden, where to place mint so it wouldn't choke the basil, how to plant tomatoes deep, how to prune the rose bush before it turned wild. The girl didn't talk much, but her hands were strong and her eyes always followed instructions. Then came the kitchen, onion chopping, soup simmering, flour properly leveled. Lily ruined the first batch of cornbread and nearly burned the second, but by the third she had figured out the oven's sweet spot and smiled just once when Elaine said, "That'll do." In the evenings, Elaine began showing her how to log expenses, catalog utilities, and sort paper records by year and relevance. "You keep track of your life," she told Lily, "because no one else will." One rainy Sunday, while Elaine was out picking up flour from the co-op, Lily found the photo album. She didn't mean to snoop. It was on the coffee table under a copy of Better Homes and Gardens. She opened it idly. On the third page was a photo of Damon, maybe 10, clutching a science fair ribbon, his cheeks smudged with what looked like frosting. Elaine stood behind him, arms around his shoulders, both of them laughing so hard it looked mid-breathless. Lily didn't mean to cry, but she did. When Elaine returned and found her there, red-eyed, the album opened to page 5, she didn't scold. She just sat beside her and flipped the page. "That was Charles," Elaine said, tapping a photo of a man with a wide smile and oil-stained hands. "He used to carry Damon on his shoulders until he said he was too grown for it. By then, Charles was already sick." Lily wiped her face with her sleeve. "He looks kind. He was—" Elaine didn't say more, didn't need to. By the end of the second week, Lily had started keeping her shoes by the door, folding her laundry without being asked, and writing down recipes in a spiral notebook she found in Elaine's junk drawer. They didn't share secrets, not out loud, but something else passed between them in the quiet. A trust without language. A tether neither had planned. Elaine still kept her boundaries. She didn't unlock her receipts drawer, didn't read Damon's messages, even when they came from new numbers. She let them pile up like dead leaves. One afternoon, Lily placed a sticky note on the fridge. "Don't forget to drink water and yell at me if I leave dishes in the sink." Elaine smiled for the first time in days. That evening, Margaret dropped by with soup and gossip, and Lily opened the door before Elaine could reach it. "She lives here?" Margaret whispered as they set the table. Elaine stirred the pot. "She's learning," she replied. "So am I." Later that night, a soft thump came from the porch, a package, no return address. Elaine picked it up, opened the cardboard flap, and stared inside. A USB drive labeled "Family Archive from Charles." She hadn't seen it in 20 years. She looked up slowly as if sensing someone watching through time, then whispered, "Let's see what you left behind." Elaine didn't open the USB drive right away. Something in her gut said, "Not yet." Instead, she brewed a cup of green tea, double-checked the locks, and settled into her desk chair to skim the week's mail. Lily was already asleep, her door cracked, the quiet rustle of pages turning in bed just audible. Elaine had just started on a utilities envelope when her phone lit up. A message from Lily. "You need to see this. Now." Elaine grabbed her glasses and walked into the hallway where Lily stood, barefoot, pale, and shaking, holding her phone like it was radioactive. "He's trying to run," Lily whispered. Elaine took the phone. A screenshot showed a bank notification, time-stamped 30 minutes earlier. It wasn't Lily's account. It was her mother's, the one Damon had helped set up for emergencies. The transaction, a wire transfer, 6 figures, converted into crypto, destination untraceable. Below that, another message, this one from a shared friend of Lily's mother. "Damon's been talking about Belize. Said he's done playing defense." Elaine's breath froze in her chest. No trial, no settlement, no admission, just escape. Within minutes, Barry was on speaker. "I'll prep the motion. If we get a judge's signature before noon tomorrow, we can freeze domestic accounts. International transfers, that's murkier, but we flag his passport. It slows him down." Elaine stood over her file cabinet like a general surveying the battlefield. "Then we move tonight. You have my full authorization." By 2 a.m., the emergency filing had been drafted, the notary was en route, and Elaine was digging through every receipt, contract, and affidavit she'd saved. The coffee in her mug had gone cold, but her pulse hadn't. At 5:46 a.m., Barry texted, "Judge signed, it's done, you got him boxed." Elaine exhaled, not with relief, but with the weight of righteous fatigue. She printed a copy of the court order on heavy linen paper and slid it into a navy envelope, the kind usually reserved for wedding invitations. She addressed it by hand. "Damon Charles Wells, temporary stay order. Personal service requested." Then walked it herself to the mailbox, coat over pajamas, hair wind-kicked, eyes sharp. Let him open it without warning. Let it burn the way her silence used to. Later that afternoon, while Lily was sorting seeds in the kitchen, her phone buzzed. She didn't flinch this time, just looked down, read the message, held the screen up to Elaine. "Damon, I don't blame you. You were always good at pretending to be loyal. Guess you found your next charity case. Does she even know who I am to you?" Lily tapped out a reply, short, precise, then deleted it instead of sending. Instead, she grabbed a pen, wrote a single word on a scrap of paper, and taped it to her phone number. Elaine. "That's a full sentence," she said. That night, Lily sat on the porch, headphones in, while Elaine finally opened the USB. The files were mostly video. Old Christmas mornings, Damon in footy pajamas, Charles singing off-key while Elaine stirred eggs on the stove. Another clip from the day Damon got into college, Elaine off-screen, laughing as he ran laps around the kitchen. She paused one video midway through. The screen froze on a single frame. Damon, arms open wide, sprinting into her hug. Frozen joy. Elaine reached up and closed the laptop slowly. She didn't cry, she didn't smile. But she did speak aloud. "Don't you dare try to run from the story you wrote." At 8:03 p.m., a final alert hit her phone. Customs alert, flagged individual, departure attempt delayed. Elaine took a pen and added a new note to her folder titled, "Final responses, chapter closed," but not yet ended. She looked out the window. Lily was asleep in the armchair, an old quilt around her shoulders. Then the porch light flickered. Another knock. No urgency, no drama, just 3 soft taps. Elaine stood, heart steady, and opened the door. The porch door clicked shut behind Elaine as she stepped out into the gold-washed morning. Dew still clung to the grass, and the mailbox cast a long, quiet shadow against the curb. In her hand, a slim navy envelope, identical to the one she'd used before, but heavier this time. Inside were 3 items. The first, a certified irrevocable termination of inheritance, finalized, notarized, sealed under court review. The second, the full transfer of Elaine's remaining estate, her savings, stocks, the deed to her home, all redirected to the Hartley Foundation and Lily's Educational Trust. No loopholes, no signatures needed from anyone but her own. And the third, a letter written on thick cotton paper in her clean, looping hand. To whom this no longer concerns, you once asked why I was still alive. This is my answer, not to serve you, not to silence myself, but to sign my name on something you'll never inherit. Legacy is earned, not assigned. Goodbye, EMW. She folded the letter with care, pressed the envelope flap down slowly, and tucked it into the mailbox with both hands. Then she locked it for the first time in 50 years. She used the small silver key Charles had given her when they first moved in. She turned it until it clicked, final, ceremonial. No more room for return addresses. Elaine didn't check if the mail truck was near. She didn't care. Back on the porch, Margaret was already seated, a pitcher of lemonade sweating between them. 2 glasses fogged with ice. Lily had gone into town to return library books. The air was still, warm, full of unsaid things. Elaine sat down slowly. Margaret poured. They didn't toast exactly, just raised their glasses and drank. He got what he wanted, Elaine said. Not bitter, not broken, just stating fact. No, Mother. Margaret leaned back in her chair. And you got what you needed. No leash. Elaine smiled, for once no weight behind it, no irony, just a slow, steady breath exhaled into a world she'd finally stopped apologizing to. The breeze nudged the edge of the tablecloth. A robin landed on the rail and pecked at nothing, then flew off again. Margaret refilled their glasses. You ever think he'll show up again? Elaine shook her head. If he does, she said, it won't be for me. The silence that followed wasn't hollow, it was whole. They watched the sun ease toward afternoon, their bodies still, their faces calm. Margaret reached over and gently touched the back of Elaine's hand. No words, no sentimentality, just presence. Later, when the shadows grew longer and Lily returned home with a new library card and a half-eaten granola bar, Elaine called her to the kitchen. From the drawer marked Final Responses, she pulled out a slim folder and handed it over. Trust documents, she said softly. You're not mine, but this part is... Lily stared at her. You're serious? Elaine nodded once. I am now. Lily didn't cry, but her voice cracked as she whispered, Thank you. Elaine turned back to the counter, peeled a lemon, and said, Just don't let it make you soft. That night, she sat on the porch one last time with a small radio, playing low jazz and the stars scattered like quiet punctuation above. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered to herself, Last chapter's written, one more to live. Inside, the lights glowed warm, the house no longer echoing. And far away in a sleek downtown office, Damon opened the final envelope, read the letter, and for the first time in his life understood exactly what it meant to be disinherited. Not from money, but from mercy. Elaine didn't expect mail that morning. The sky had just begun its stretch into spring blue, soft sunlight catching on the kitchen window pane. She was halfway through slicing strawberries when she heard the quiet metal sigh of the mailbox lid closing. Curious but unhurried, she wiped her hands, tied her robe a little tighter, and stepped out onto the porch. Inside the mailbox, a single envelope, cream-colored, no return address. The handwriting was tight, slanted, unfamiliar. She brought it inside and sat at the table, her tea still steaming. With a letter opener, a small brass one shaped like a feather, she sliced it clean. The note inside was simple, just a page lined, no signature. Dear Miss Wells, I don't know you, but I read your story. I read how you stood up for yourself even when everyone told you to sit down and be grateful. I was awful to my own mom last fall, screamed at her for not co-signing a car loan. I said things I wish I could erase. Then I saw your face in the paper and I shut my mouth. I wrote my mom a letter. I told her thank you. Your story didn't just end, it rewired something. You don't know me, but you saved something in me. Just someone listening. Elaine read the letter twice, then once more. She didn't cry, not exactly, but her eyes blinked slowly, as though giving memory time to register this new kind of ache. A soft one that didn't hollow, one that filled. She folded the letter gently, placed it inside a new folder labeled Echoes, and whispered, "That'll do." 3 years later, the auditorium was packed. Folding chairs in neat rows, balloons in the school colors swayed gently along the railings. At the podium, Lily stood in a navy cap and gown, the gold tassel dancing just above her cheek as she adjusted the mic. Elaine sat in the front row next to Margaret, her hands folded calmly in her lap. The trustee from Hartley sat 2 seats down. The mayor was there too, but Elaine didn't register them. She was watching Lily. The girl cleared her throat and looked out over the sea of expectant faces. When I first came to Elaine Wells's porch, I didn't think anyone could want me. I was all edges and ash, but she didn't try to fix me. She taught me how to stand beside things without controlling them. She looked directly at Elaine. And she showed me what strength looks like when it's quiet and doesn't need permission. Applause swelled, but Lily raised a hand. "One last thing," she said. "This diploma is for my biological family. But this speech, this future, is for the woman who taught me legacy is not about blood, but about boundaries, and about who shows up when it's hard." Elaine smiled. This time she let the tears come, not for the past, for the living present. That evening, the porch glowed with low amber light. Lily had gone to celebrate with friends. Margaret had gone home with a flask of lemonade and a wink. The house was still, content. Elaine stepped down the path to the mailbox, just as she had 100 times before. She opened it slowly, empty. And for the first time, that emptiness didn't feel like absence. It felt like peace. She turned, the breeze brushing her sleeve. The house stood strong behind her, warm lights, one bedroom made, one life rebuilt. As she walked back, each step sounded like punctuation at the end of a sentence she was proud to have written. She didn't look over her shoulder, didn't check the sky, just climbed the steps, turned the knob, and let the door fall shut behind her with the quiet grace of a chapter closing. Then, from inside, the sound of a kettle whistling, a sign she was not waiting anymore. She was living, and that was the real inheritance.